Alright everybody, today I'm going to be talking about approach options in BlazBlue. We want to make sure that you have all of the choices available to you, that they're clearly outlined so that you can better get in on your opponent, open them up, and do some damage. There's actually a lot of different ways to approach in BlazBlue, and a lot of them are kind of disguised or don't really seem that different if you're just casually watching. So I'm going to go over each and every one of them and try to break down when they're useful, what they beat, and all that kind of thing. First up, we'll start with the absolute most commonly used. The most common is just to run up and start hitting people, right? This is a completely valid approach option, especially if you play a character with a fast run speed like Tsubaki or Raidhyn or Jin or a big portion of the cast. You can just run up and you can start pressing buttons. Now, if you have a nice long-range button like Tsubaki's 5B or Ragnar's 5B or my 5C or all sorts of things, you can run up and hit them at the far range of that button, which is a smart way to play neutral. You don't have to be right on top of them before you throw out an attack, because with any luck, they're going to be running towards you at the same time and you can catch them out. So running at people and throwing out an attack is definitely a good way to approach. Definitely one of your choices. So our next approach option, if you're new to the game, you're going to see this a lot, and this is going to be the jump up and instant air dash approach. This is something that a lot of newer players do because air dashing feels really cool, but it's also difficult for new players to do instant air dashes. And if you see someone doing this as an approach option, they're either playing incredibly deep mind games with you, or chances are they're a beginner of some kind, because you usually don't see a jump up instant air dash from players who've been playing for a long time. You usually see instant air dashes, which we'll go over in a little bit, or they run up and they do buttons. So if you see this, just know that this is incredibly vulnerable to anti-airs. You can use it against players who are unsuspecting, but just realize that when you jump up and instant air dash afterwards, that you're definitely slowing down your approach. Still a choice, still an option, not one of the best that's out there. Instead, if you're going to air dash your approach, you want to work on instant air dashing, which is a very common method that's used at all levels of the game. Instant air dashing is basically, instead of jumping up and then putting in the air dash, you press diagonal twice. So you would press up toward diagonal twice. So in BlazBlue notation, you press 9-9 or 9-6, and you get this more instant version of the air dash, because it's getting that dash input including with the jump input. So instant air dash is actually a really solid way to approach people. And of course, you can come in with like your good jump in button and start doing damage and all that. You almost always want to lead with a button when you're instant air dashing, because once you're committed to the instant air dash, the button isn't going to come out until towards the end of that air dash. Doesn't matter how soon you press the button, it's going to come out at that it has a minimum distance the air dash has to travel before it'll come out. So just keep that in mind. You can also use instant air dashes to cross up. So on certain characters who have cross up moves, you can use it as a cross up. So just keep in mind that's also a choice. Your spacing just has to be a little different. But air dashes can be used as a cross-up or just as a front attack. Air dashes are very common. They lose to anti-airs. They lose to air throws. Clearly they could tech the air throw, but they do lose to things, and there are ways to beat them, but they're definitely worth practicing the instant air dash version. Again, remember, if you see someone jump and then air dash, it's a good mark that they're new. Be ready to anti-air those guys a lot, because they're going to keep trying it over and over again, and you can take advantage of it every time. Okay, next up is just basic jump-ins. And this is actually something that I feel like a lot of people who are new to BlazBlue forget, is that it's totally fine to just, if they're blocking, let's set Ragnar's here to block real quick. So let's say that they're blocking, it's totally fine to just jump afterwards. Let's say they're blocking everything, right? And you're pressuring, right? It's totally fine to just use a jump in, especially if they're crouch blocking, right? Because that's actually gonna it'll actually open them up afterwards. So it's totally fine to just jump and use a normal jump as a jump in. Just be aware that there's a lot of moves that don't cross up in BlazBlue, so especially if they're crouching, that's just not going to happen. So if you are going to jump in, just know that you've got to be careful about whether you're coming in on the front side or if you are actually going to try to use a crouch up. But jumping at people like this, at this range, you know, especially off something that's jump cancelable, like Tsubaki's 5B, for instance, is jump cancelable. So you can actually do this kind of approach on people, and it's really good at catching people who want to press buttons that hit low to the ground afterwards and that kind of thing. You can also use it, you know, while you're pressuring. Instead of canceling into a special, you can use a jump in, and that's going to be a good approach option for you. It's not necessarily going to help you out when you're at this range, when you're at instant air dash range. You know, jumping forward like this isn't going to be as good. Although it does have some uses if you think they're going to be running at you. So just know, like, just regular jumps are totally fine. Best used when mixed up or when added in as a jump cancel during pressure, but definitely an option that kind of gets overlooked because when you start playing BlazBlue or you start playing any anime game, you're like, oh man, this air dash thing is super cool. That's not in some of the other 2D fighters I've played. I want to use that all the time. So it's very easy to forget that just jumping in on people is actually a really good choice a lot of the time, especially if you have them in the corner. And there's actually a lot of setups and meaty setups and things that work off regular jump on knockdowns, but that's a whole different thing for a different time. There's also, of course, you can also jump over people and cross them up. With Tsubaki, it doesn't work. Tsubaki, she needs the momentum from the instant air dash for her attacks to cross up. So Tsubaki's a poor character for that, but there are some characters that have more natural cross-up possibilities, like Hakumen and Raidhyn both have jump over cross-ups. So just kind of get to know what the cross-ups are in your character and remember that it's totally viable. You don't have to instant air dash everything. For example, while I'm thinking about this, I forgot one of the crucial ones is in BlazBlue, double jumping is a legit approach. If you think that somebody is going to anti-air you, double jumping and dropping in like on their heads with a button is a legitimate way to approach someone. And it's actually something that you see Jin players do quite a lot because of how good Jump C is. Same thing with Mai. Like, double jumping is actually really good. One of the other things that you can do is you can jump over people and you can air backdash, which is something that is not as useful as it is in Guilty Gear. In Guilty Gear, you'll see this kind of thing a lot more often. But if you're running and you have that momentum from a jump, you can actually use it to fake cross someone up. So if your character has a cross up, this is actually something that is pretty interesting to use. I don't use it that often just because I haven't really incorporated it into my play, but it's one of those things where if you're a player that really likes to be on the aggressive side and really likes to have those mix-ups, definitely a choice to do this. Clearly, it's very spacing dependent as far as to when and how it works. If you're running at full speed, you're going to get further distance on your jump. You know, if you're right here when you do it, your jump's not going to go as far. So just kind of be aware that all of that plays into your jump in approach options. The last two are kind of going to be a little bit more high level as far as approach options. And this is something that you're going to see during a lot of like very high level play, like top 8 BlazBlue. You're going to see people do what's called a dash break. So dash break is when you're dashing in, like you're going to run in. The idea is you've conditioned your opponent to expect a button when you run in, right? They're expecting a button when you come in at them. So what dash breaking does is right when your button would come out and your opponent you're expecting the opponent to counter you, you come in and you use barrier to stop your momentum and go into blocking immediately. And what this does is it makes your approaches a lot more unpredictable, because if you're coming in with a dash break, you're guarding most of the time as you're moving forward. And what it also does is it means that if you're able to incorporate this into your movement, you can now, you know, be a little bit more unpredictable with when you're actually going to go in with a button or with an attack. In my opinion, it's not really necessary until you get to much higher levels of play. This is actually something that I've been working to incorporate into my own gameplay, because it's something that I don't do enough, and it's something I see a lot of the people who consistently beat me do. So it's a little weird because you have to get used to doing this, you know, run forward, back, and instant barrier all at the same time. But it's definitely worth practicing. It's definitely incorporating. Once you get comfortable with all the other approach options that we've talked about already, it's definitely something to think about doing. One of the other options that includes barriers is to jump in and immediately start barriering. So using this as a way to jump over a potential attack while guarding yourself is also a very important thing at higher levels of the game. Once you get all these other things done, this kind of lets you come in safely and block any potential anti-airs. So, and if they press a button while you jump that you go over, now you're at the advantage on your way down. You can actually still like attack even after guarding against any potential incoming attacks while you're approaching. So this jump in and barrier is actually really good. Now, one of the confusing things is that this doesn't work with air dashing. Air dashing, you actually have to wait until the end of the air dash before your barrier will come out, which is why it almost always prioritizes attacks. You actually have to wait until you start falling to the ground if you want barrier to come out. If you press barrier before that, you're going to get an attack because the game believes you're trying to attack the opponent. So just know, like, if you're having frustration about barriering in the air, using barrier, and you're unable to get it out, is probably because you're trying to do it off of an instant air dash and not a jump. Doing it off of a jump is immediate. Doing it off an air dash is you gotta wait until you start falling back towards the ground, so just keep that in mind. One of the other things that you can do just to kind of mix things up alongside, you know, dash breaking and just kind of jump in and the rest of it, is you can always run up and then jump back and press a button. This is really good for people who want to who are trying to counter your jump-ins with an air throw or counter your jump-ins with like a fast but slow air-to-air, because a lot of people don't expect this to happen. Now, Tsubaki is not very impressive because she has pretty stubby buttons compared to a lot of other people in the cast, but this is something you'll see like Raidhyn do quite frequently with Jump C. You'll see Mai do it with Jump C. So people who have really large buttons in the air, this is actually a pretty good mix-up for approaching that gives you a little bit more of a defensive option and kind of, you know, goading your opponent into attacking you. Yeah, so to go over everything that we've talked about really quick, your basic options are, you know, running at people's faces, throwing out a button, jumping and instant air dashing. The hallmark approach of the new BlazBlue player. You have your instant air dash, and then you have your instant air dash cross up. You've got your regular jump in. You've got your jump in with a guard. You've got your jump over cross up, which Tsubaki is terrible at. And then, of course, you've got your jump over air backdash, which is another good choice, especially for rushdown characters. You've got options like dash breaking when you're going in, so that you can you know, confuse and confound your opponent, and also protect yourself, which is really good. And then, of course, the run in and jump back option as well. So the reason I wanted to go over this, and the main reason I kind of wanted to make this list, and there's probably more approach options I haven't thought about, like, you know, character specific stuff where you're running in like this, or you've got special moves that will cancel your motion and all sorts of things, or Tsubaki where she can charge in the air and then instant air dash afterwards, so it's even more deceptive than your regular jump instant air dash shenanigans. So there's definitely more ways to approach than just these, but I wanted to outline kind of what the basic ones were so that you could start actively thinking about how you approach people. When I've gone to play in BlazBlue tournaments and I fight you know, players who aren't playing at such a high level, the one thing that I see a lot is they have one method for approaching. There's a single way that they try to get on you. It's, you know, they're either going to run up as fast as they can, or they're going to jump and they're going to instant air dash. And it's not that these options are bad on their own, it's just that it's too easy to get tunnel vision and always approach exactly the same way every time. And of course, depending on what character you play, there's a number of different ways that are good approaches for those characters as well. For example, while I'm thinking about this, I forgot one of the crucial ones is in BlazBlue, double jumping is a legit approach. If you think that somebody is going to anti-air you, double jumping and dropping in like on their heads with a button is a legitimate way to approach someone. And it's actually something that you see Jin players do quite a lot because of how good Jump C is. Same thing with Mai. Like, double jumping is actually really good. Even then, if double jumping is what you do all the time, every time, your opponent will adapt to that, will start punishing you for it. So just wanted to go over this list so that you guys can remember all the different options that are available to you. Hopefully you can incorporate those into your game plan. Going over this list, it reminds me that I still need to work on dash breaking, and that I should probably double jump every once in a while, because Tsubaki's, you know, falling jump C isn't so bad. If you have any more questions or any specific stuff that you'd like to know about this, feel free to hit me up. Always happy to answer questions and go over stuff. And I'll see you next time. Hey.